because it's something that we all will encounter or have encountered already, and that is time management and coping with stress. You know, we're all familiar with that, right? So time management. As managers, supervisors, leaders, we definitely have to manage our time all the time, even as students and as instructors. I have to manage my time just as much as you guys do. So it's something that is important. And a lot of times it will involve you having to set goals, timelines, deadlines, and meeting those goals and timelines. Now, if you go in the library or even in the bookstore, you will find tons and tons of books about time management. So the books are there. You can read all these books about time management. You can become an expert in knowing about time management, but until you actually apply it to your situation, to your life, then you don't really know that much about time management until you actually apply it. So we're going to go through a few different types of ways that you can waste time as a manager, and we're going to talk about why we shouldn't do these things. So the first one is management by crisis. Does everybody know what that is? Management by crisis is basically when you are trying to put out fires. So by the time you're trying to solve the problem, it's already a crisis. It's already crazy. So managers who practice this are wasting time. And the reason they're wasting time is because they have not planned, they have not anticipated, they basically reacted rather than being proactive. So as you run around trying to put out this fire, you're wasting time that you could be doing something else. So the next type of time waster is a perfectionist. Why do you think that wastes time?
Because everything is not going to be 100% perfect. You just have to either go with that 90% or that 80% sometimes and just keep it moving. Just make sure you get everything done. But they want that 100% or that 120%, and that's what's going to take up most of their time, trying to get it exactly perfect.
Right. That perfectionist is going to spend time trying to make it perfect and make it pretty when pure presentation with just black font would be fine. So you don't want to waste too much time trying to be a perfectionist. Next one is failing to delegate. We talked about delegation a few weeks ago, and when you try to do everything yourself and you don't delegate out small tasks to other employees, you're wasting time, because that's time that you could be spending doing other managerial tasks or things that are more important or more priority. So, what about being passive? Time waster? These are the people who take on everything and can never say no. Every time your boss asks you to do something, every time an employee needs help, you can't say no. And as a result, you're overloaded with so much to do. So it's a waste of time because, again, because you're taking on so much things, you are not necessarily prioritizing what's most important and spending your time doing those things. So what that means is, you gotta learn how to say no. No is very important. And if you're a passive individual, this is gonna be something that's very difficult for you to do. So how are we gonna say no? How do we decide when to say no? Do we say no to our boss?
It depends.
It depends.
Yes.
So you're gonna say no to your boss?
Honestly, I'm a very passive, used to be a very passive person. Like, people coming to me, hey, I need you to do this. Okay, I do what I need to do. But when it came to my boss, it was because they could rely on me to get it done. So everybody would come to me and say, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And it just seemed like I was being just pulled in every direction, and then everything was coming back towards me. So I had to just start saying no. Like, I don't think I'm gonna get to that today. Can you find somebody else to do that?
So, but if we say no to our boss, are we risking being fired?
Probably no, but it's going to put you in a bad side. That means when
Yeah.
she asks you for the next time, she probably won't
She
even
might not come
ask
to
you
next
again.
time.
Yeah,
Right.
she probably going to ask somebody else.
So that's a difficult thing to weigh, right?
Yeah.
But on the other end, as we just talked about, if you continue to say yes every time your boss asks you for something, how are you going to be able to juggle everything else you have to do?
You're just gonna be that number one person they run
So
to every
you have to you have to learn to say no, but not as easy as it sounds is what I'm trying to deliver here.
It's like me, like somebody, this is the second time they asked me for work, to work for her, and I know that this weekend I'm gonna be busy because I have to do like finals and all that stuff, but I still say yes because I couldn't say no.
So you're that passive individual.
I just told her yes because I just work till 3:15 on Sundays.
It's practice. No.
I mean, it's hard. It
is
really
hard.
is hard. When you're a passive person,
And
it
it
really
makes me
is
feel
hard.
bad because she don't want to use her PTO, because we just like been there 4 months and we don't want to use it, so it makes me feel bad. So I just
It's very hard, but especially when you're in the management capacity, you got to learn how to say no. Otherwise, you are going to waste time. So we talked about some different types of ways you can waste time, but here are some principal time wasters. Number 1, doing things you don't need to do personally. We just talked about that. Some things you need to delegate. 2, inefficient planning. Obviously, if you don't plan, you're going to manage by crisis and waste time. Meetings. We talked about meetings last week. This is definitely a principal time waster. When you don't run your meetings efficiently, you end up wasting time. And interruptions. People just popping in your office. What about those managers that say, oh, I have an open door policy? It's a great policy. However, then you run into this issue. When people are always coming in because you have that open door policy. Sometimes you end up wasting time. So let's talk about our desk for a little bit, our workstation. That's the first place you can start to make sure that you are not wasting time, right? How can you do this? Try to make sure your desk is organized. You want to make sure that you have things filed so that you can easily access them. Sometimes people will come in your office and say, do you have a report from last month? If you have to spend 15 minutes looking for it, what are you doing? You're wasting time. So it's going to be a lot more helpful if you have a filing system where you can easily access information. And as a manager, you're going to need to do this because you're going to be interacting with a lot of different reports. They also talk about how you position your office, how you position your desk, and why your desk should not face the door. Why do you think that's important?
Because as people walk by your office, they'll see you,
Right.
and then they want to come in and talk to you.
Right, exactly.
But if the desk is on the side, they have to actually come, knock on the door, and look to
Right.
see if you're in your office.
Right. So even placement within your office can be important when it comes to time management. Now let's talk about paper flow. They suggest that you try to handle things only once. So what that means is if we think, in terms of emails, what that means is try to only look at that email one time. Because if you're having to go back repeatedly and look at that email again, you're wasting time. So when you handle each email or each piece of paper or each document that you view, they say to practice the 3D idea, which is delegate, discard, and do, right? Or do, discard, do, delegate, and discard. So what that means is, let's say you open the email, you read the email, either there's going to be an action item or if not, maybe it's just information. If there isn't an action item, then you're either going to do it, or if you're not going to do it, find somebody else who's going to do it, which means you have to delegate it, and then once you're done, get rid of it. That way you don't have to go back to that email anymore, and that's your one time. So, a lot of times we will encounter information overload. Again, let's use email as this example again. You get tons and tons of emails a day as a manager. Well, that's information overload, right? How do you prioritize your emails and that information? Obviously, you want to sort through the ones that are most important. Probably want to prioritize those to make sure that you tend to those first, rather than the ones that are just information-only emails, right? But the main important thing is to make sure that you don't become overwhelmed with all this information, because when that happens, then again, you're wasting time, you may start managing by crisis, you're not going to be organized, and, consequences will arise. So how do we plan and schedule and make sure that we're, managing our time correctly? Well, we need to set some goals. And The goals may be small, maybe a daily goal of, I'm gonna have all my work done by 4 o'clock so that I can return phone calls for the last hour. Whatever your goal may be, it's important that you establish them so that, again, you're not wasting time. And you can even apply this to yourself as a student and trying to plan. You know, you talked about these last few weeks being finals. This is a perfect time for you to plan out and schedule how you're gonna study for those finals, you know, when are you gonna take them, if they're online, and that sort of stuff, so that you don't procrastinate and end up wasting time. You can also use to-do lists. If you have a planner or a calendar, I do this sometimes. I'll write down everything I have to do and I'll just check it off. It makes me feel better when I see the check next to it. Or you can number the items in order of importance. However, everybody's going to have a different way that they accomplish these things. So to-do list is a good one. Delegation is probably one of the most important ways to save time. And the reason we've talked about delegation so much is because it's so important, and it does save a lot of time. When you're able to delegate tasks and activities to someone else, it opens you up to be able to take care of things that you're getting paid to do, rather than, you know, the smaller items that someone else can be doing. Supervisors that don't delegate tend to be the ones that aren't organized and aren't as good of a manager as the ones that do. So, procrastination. Who procrastinates?
Everybody.
At some point, everybody does, right? At some point, there's something that you have procrastinated on, whether it be school or work or personal. We all procrastinate at some point. So, notice it says minimize, not delete, because at some point, everybody is going to procrastinate. So, how can we minimize procrastination? Here are a few ways. We can use lists, task lists. We can start out the day with our high priorities. I do this, it works for me. I try to take care of the things that are high priority first at the beginning of the day. That way I know that it's gonna get done. Avoid the temptation to stall. That temptation is so strong, I know it is. It's very strong. Oh, well, I'll just watch 10 minutes of TV.
It turns into 2 hours.
10 minutes turns into 2 hours.
Or you go take a nap. Or
The temptation is very strong. Avoid the temptation. Do not get involved with trivia. Some things are just not important. Just overlook it. Because if you don't, you're going to procrastinate. And don't reward it, right? Don't reward procrastination. What that means is don't involve yourself in fun activities or pleasant activities. Watching TV. Watching TV is a good example of rewarding your procrastination before you take your test and do your homework. You want to make sure you block out enough time to complete the task, right? If you know that you have a test to take and the test takes 2 hours, you don't want to block out an hour. That doesn't make sense, right? So you want to make sure you block out enough time. You can always divide a large task into smaller tasks. I do this also, and it tends to help me feel like I'm getting somewhere. Because sometimes if you don't do it that way, the task just seems so large, and then it's harder to fight that temptation that we just talked about. Sometimes you got to give yourself a pep talk and convince yourself that whatever it is that you need to do is important. You really need to do it. Because, oh, this discussion board, you know, is only 2%. I don't need to do it, right? Is the mentality we get sometimes. No, you do need to do it because this is your grade you're talking about. So sometimes you have to convince yourself that it's important. Challenge your excuses. Give me an excuse. An excuse as to why you did not turn in your case study.
Didn't have enough time.
Didn't have enough time. So how can we challenge that excuse?
How much time did you actually work towards that case study? How much time did you put into that case study?
Right.
Actually doing the work.
So you want to challenge your excuses. We all know if our excuses are good or bad. We all know if we give that lame excuse, we know if it's lame or not, right? So sometimes you have to challenge your excuses. And set a timer for 5 minutes. If we say we're gonna watch TV for 10 minutes, all right, set a timer. Because if you don't set that timer, 10 minutes will turn into 2 hours. So set a
That
timer.
happened to me yesterday.
And once the timer goes off, get to it. Tell yourself, all right, 10 minutes, I'm setting the timer right now
For 10
so that
minutes.
when it goes off, I'm gonna get in here.
But you know, it's kind of hard
Really
being
bad
a very bad procrastinator. That 10 minutes, that timer go off, and honestly, to tell you the truth, I'll go in there and I'll be like, I'll tell my son, go turn that timer off, and I'll continue to do it.
Or how about
Yeah.
this? We're gonna set the timer on the TV
To turn off.
to turn off.
There it is.
Just turn it back on.
And then turn it back on, right? I mean, because honestly, like yesterday, I had a plan on I was going to do all my Spanish homework and I was going to get it out the way. It's not due until, tomorrow. Well, yeah, today. In which I finished it last night. But at the time when I was doing it, I was sitting on the couch watching TV. And I was, nitpicking, do here, and I sit it out to the side and I do it again. Next thing I know, I was knocked out. And 2 hours later, they're waking me up like, did you finish? And I'm asleep with my books all over. So it's kind of, I do know what you mean about procrastination is setting that little ding, ding, ding. Get back to work.
All right, so we talked about placement of our desk and the reason for that. So now we're gonna spend a little time to talk more about visitor control. Visitor control being people coming into your office. First thing we can do to control that is train our staff properly and empower them to feel confident enough to do things on their own so that they don't have to come in your office every 5 minutes to ask you, am I doing this right? Did I need to do this also? Or what am I doing wrong? Whatever it may be, if they feel empowered enough, then they probably won't need to come to you as much, right? You want to train your staff to help guests or visitors or patients when you're not available. If you're on the phone, you shouldn't have to put your call on hold because someone comes in your office and needs help. They should, at the minimum, be able to assist this person until you at least get off the phone, right? Meet people in their territory rather than in yours. If you need to meet with someone, go to their office or go to their area rather than have them come to your office, because if they come to your office, it's a lot harder to kick them out than for you to just say, I have to go, I have to leave. It's kind of like when you invite people to your house or when you go to their house. It's easier to go to their house because if they come to your house, it's a lot harder to, tell them to leave, right? Than if you go to their house and say, oh, I'm getting tired, I'm gonna go now, right? Kind of the same thing. And shut your door when you need some peace and quiet. Even if you have an open door policy, sometimes you gotta close your door. Sometimes you gotta close your door to get work done. That's just how it is. And so you have to know that this is what you have to do sometimes. As much as you may wanna have that open door policy, know when to close the door. When people come to your office, intercept them. Catch them before they come through the threshold of the door. Because once people get in, they're gonna sit down, they're gonna get comfortable, and they're just gonna let everything out, and you'll be in there for hours, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so if they do make it through the threshold, keep standing, don't sit down. Because if you're standing, then they're less likely to sit down, right? No? You like they're gonna sit down anyway? Most of the time, I found that if you keep standing, then they'll stand. Some people will sit down, but if you keep standing, they'll see that you can't sit for long, right?
Unless it's your boss and he comes sits down and you like,
Oh yeah, if your boss comes in and sits down,
I
then,
know it's gonna be an hour conversation.
you gotta kind of sit down.
I wish I would have known those little key points up there, meet them at the door, because once they step in, they do sit down and they start talking, I just, you need to hurry up and get out, I got the next customer behind you,
Yeah.
and I just smile and like.
Well, the last one says use verbal and nonverbal language to signal that you wish to end the meeting. What types of verbal and nonverbal language do you think
Okay, well, okay, got it.
Okay, well, or you can just be honest and tell them. I only have about 10 more minutes, right? You know, I don't mean to interrupt, but I only have about 10 more minutes. Or you can, I don't know, continue to check your computer.
Get up, go to the file cabinet, just continue to move around.
Right.
That way they'll be like, okay, well,
They'll
I
know
see
that
you're
you're busy.
so
Yeah.
let me come back later.
Group meetings. We talked a little bit about meetings, and I think this is a good recommendation actually to try to limit your meetings to 45 minutes or less. After about 45 minutes, people stop paying attention anyway, which is why I'm glad we have 50-minute classes. Because I know you guys will just zone out after about 50
Oh,
minutes.
you should have seen me in chemistry. I had that class for 2 hours. I was about to pass out.
It's hard.
It just keeps
It's
going
hard to
and
pay
going
attention
and
for that
going and
long. If you do, for whatever reason, have to have a meeting longer than that, at least try to give the attendees a break, a short break, so that they can stretch and do whatever they need to do before they get restless. So, time poorly spent. Let's talk about these a little bit. Tolerating abuses of open door policy. Poorly spent time. Overuse of memos, right? Email messages. Have you ever had that boss that just sends about 50 emails a day? That's time you're wasting on both ends, the sender and the receiver, because you have to read all of them, right? Poorly run meetings, we just talked about that. We talked about delegating. Excessive socializing, this is important because this is one that in every place that I've worked, I've seen this happen, where it's just too much talking. And the thing about talking is, especially if it's a really good conversation, it can easily just go overboard, and before you know it, it's been 30 to 45 minutes. So socializing is one that as a manager, you definitely want to make sure that you keep an eye on so that you're not wasting a lot of time. Doing other people's work. Sometimes as a manager, you always want to help your employees, but sometimes you may help too much. And when that happens, you're starting to waste time. This is time that is poorly spent. Accepting unimportant assignments. We talked about this a little bit with our boss, and our boss asking us to help out. What if it's an assignment that's not important?
Take
but
it and
it comes
delegate
from your boss. What are we gonna do?
Take
I
it
take it and delegate it down.
somebody else.
Take it and delegate it? I think that's a good idea. Or maybe we negotiate the timing with our boss. Can I put this off into next week because I have, I have something urgent I'm working on right now. Lack of planning, obviously, and inadequate paper flow and storage. Again, if your desk is piled up with, McDonald's bags and papers and everything else, it's gonna be hard for you to be organized and planned with a desk like that. So you wanna make sure your paper flow is organized. And procrastination. So what are forms of time theft? I like the word time theft. I like that.
Stealing my time.
What about unjustified sick days? I want to take this sick day. What if I really sick?
Playing hooky.
Right? Arriving late or leaving early, that's an obvious one. Taking long breaks. Sometimes people think, I'm the manager, so I can take a 2-hour lunch break. Time thief, right? Leaving one's post for personal trips. Performing personal tasks on the job. I'm going to do this homework, right? While I'm at work. Time thief. We're probably all guilty, but it is what it is. Socializing, interrupting others. What about this one? You're wasting time and you're wasting their time. So that one's important. And wandering around when you're supposed to be working. This happens all the time.
Oh, Lord, I've had a couple.
Wanderers, right? All right, so we talked about time management. Now we're going to switch a little bit to stress. And we all have stress. And when you're in charge, you will have stress. It comes with the title. So a few external causes for stress. the actual work environment. Some work environments are very stressful, whether it be the people or the organizational culture or just the nature of the business. Healthcare, busy, we're involving lives, we have emergencies every day. All these things can cause stress. Work relationships, maybe you don't really get along with the people you work with. Maybe the interpersonal relationships aren't there. It can be stressful. Leadership, obviously, could be one, and then outside factors. So what about internal factors? That would be within. What if we are not confident? We just got this position as manager, but we're not 100% confident that we're capable of being a manager. It's stressful, right? Maybe we have health problems. Maybe that back of ours, that back of mine, is causing me stress. Irrational thinking and clash of actions with values. Maybe you don't necessarily agree with the way the business is running. Maybe it goes against your moral beliefs. Emotions. Emotions can definitely cause stress, right? And we all have emotions. We may try to escape them, but they're there. And these include fears, guilt, and anger. You know, what if we're interacting with difficult people every day? I think you mentioned that at one point you work with Alzheimer's patients, right? Mm-hmm. These are difficult patients. You may get some frustration and some anger at some point working with those types of people. So these things can cause stress also. So let's think about, what if the problem is you as a supervisor or as a manager? What if you're the cause of stress for other people? You know, we're talking about what causes us to be stressed out and how leading is such a stressful job. But we have to also remember that as we're in charge, maybe our stress is causing other people's stress that we lead and that we manage. And so we have to keep that in mind when, if our turnover is high or people are leaving without any explanation or without any justifiable explanation, like moving or relocation, we have to sit and think, are we the cause, right? And if we are the cause, obviously something needs to be done about it. And, you know, we have some responsibilities as managers and as supervisors. And it's our responsibility to reduce that stress if it's there within our employees. How do we do this? Well, we have to somewhat protect our employees, right? We have to empower them to make sure that they feel confident in their job. And if we see that someone is becoming burned out, we got to take the steps to counsel them. Even in my job, if I see students that seem like they're getting a little burned out, it's my responsibility as their leader to try to counsel them and take the remedial steps to try to, help them with the stress.
I know this sounds funny, but what kind of steps do you take for burnout? You know what I'm saying? Because there's so many things that can burn you out. Okay, let's do as a student. How would you do that for a student if they're burned out?
Well, I think some of it depends on the student because every student is different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the first step when I see a student that, some students can hide well. Some students it's apparent. Like, if it's a student that typically does well and all of a sudden in a few weeks I see a drastic drop, then I know something's wrong. So I try to reach out to them and talk to them to see what's going on. And for some students, they just need to talk to somebody, and that's all it takes to get them back on track. Sometimes students fall off, and they kind of need somebody to push them back on track, kind of light the fire up on them and tell them, With other students, sometimes they just need a little help. I had one student at one point last semester that had a kid that was really, really sick, was basically in ICU almost the whole semester. And so, again, the first step was talking to them, and once I found out what the issue was, in that case, to help with the burnout, I helped them, we talked out due dates to kind of help so that it didn't seem as overwhelming. So we made some alternative arrangements with regards. So it kind of depends on the situation and the student. Some students I can't help. I can try, but it's not going to do anything. I have tried and it doesn't do anything. So, you know, it kind of depends on the situation, kind of depends on the student. But a lot of times I actually find that when a student says that they're burned out, all they need is a little push to get back on track.
It's a confidence thing.
Yeah.
Once you start getting in certain classes, you start out with that fire, like, hey, I'm gonna get it. And then as time goes on, as you know, you go into your own life and you get pulled this way and that way, it just seems like things fall to the sideline. So yeah, like she said, sometimes you need that kick in the butt.
Most of them
hey,
just
you
need
can
a-
do it.
Yeah, most
Get
of them
back
just
out
need
there.
a push. Sometimes I think students forget the purpose that they're here, and they forget, you know, how talented they are and that they are capable of finishing the class, or even down to the fact that they have people watching them, whether it be family or kids. Sometimes they forget, oh, if I, you know, drop this class, what type of example am I setting for my kids? Sometimes you have to remind them of that, and sometimes that's all they need. So, you know, it can be hard as far as taking those steps with burnout. And sometimes you can do X, Y, and Z and it still won't work. But you have to go into it knowing that there's a possibility you may not be successful in trying to counsel them, but you still have to try. And I think you can apply the same thing to a manager and employee type of situation. I think the first step should always be to talk to them, to see what, you have to see what the cause is of the burnout. What's the root issue? What's causing them to be burned out? It could be another class that's causing them. Maybe that class is taking all of their energy because they're just not being able to do well in that course. But it takes a little bit of investigation. It can be difficult, but a lot of times people that get burned out are usually fairly good students or fairly good employees. Everybody just has that limit. Everybody has a threshold, and once they reach that, sometimes it just fall off. Other ways that we can reduce stress. This is higher stress resistant people, but there's only so much that you can get from an interview or a resume. There's always that question during the interview, how do you handle stress? Sure, there's always that answer that says, I handle stress well. That's just kind of how it goes, right? So you can try to hire stress resistance people, but there's no sure way of knowing what type of person it is and how they handle stress. Unless maybe you get this information from a reference, a prior employer. You can ask them, how do they handle stressful situations? Training. You want to make sure that you conduct your training very thoroughly. Empower employees. You know, we just talked about counseling, counsel stress workers. Make sure you have time for breaks. If it's a very stressful environment, like a hospital, you probably need time for breaks. It's a very busy, fast-paced environment. So at some point, your employees probably need a 5 to 10 minute break throughout the day. And like I just talked about, modifying assignments, modifying due dates, deadlines, etc. Sometimes you have to modify things if it's gonna help people be less stressed out. You'll find that some organizations put a lot of weight on stress programs, which I think is a good thing. And in those types of organizations, you'll find that they have good EAP programs and support groups that help with stress, which I think is great. And those are the types of organizations that have those employees that stay around for a while. Coping methods. So maybe we can't reduce that burnout, or maybe we can't reduce that stress. All right, well, how can we help them cope with it and deal with it, right? Relaxation or meditation techniques, yoga, whatever else you may want to do. Exercise. One employer that I had used to give us a discount to fitness center. And I think that was their way of trying to help us not only stay healthy, but also cope with stress. So you can do something like that. With exercise, this may involve you creating an exercise group within your department. Diet adjustment, review of job designs, communication always works, and conflict resolution. We talked about burnout and how it's so important. So how do we tell if someone's burned out? Maybe they're depressed. Are you waking up tired even though you went to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
You might be burned out. Chronic fatigue, high blood pressure, no sleep, insomnia, or cardiac irregularities. You guys have it? You guys burned out?
I'm burned out.
I have like 4 of them.
So all of you are burned out?
But it's
My God.
not because of school. It's just like you said, you take on other things, you know. And with me, my personal is I feel like I'm just taking on too much. So I'm having to start to shed a couple of layers. Like, no, you stay over there. You stay over there. I gotta go this way, because it was getting to that point where I'm waking up like I didn't even go to sleep. Like, I go in the kitchen and it's just like, I just can't get moving. I'm just tired. I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm not sleeping at night. I'm going to bed at 1 o'clock because I'm trying to fit everything into that day. Then I'm getting up at 6. I'm tired. So yeah.
Like me today I couldn't go to the gym early, but if I wait, like, on Mondays, I wake up at 6:45 so I can be at the gym, and then it gives me energy. I don't know, but I feel that way. I feel like I have a lot of energy. But today, I have to go after 10. I hate going after 10. I don't know why. Because I feel already tired. I don't know why. But I like to go early in the morning, and then I feel.
That's because it helps you
Get that heart pumping, that blood.
It does. It works good when you do that early in the morning.
Really helps.
I wish
a
I
lot.
could get up at 6:45. That sleep is
I wish I could get up at 6:45 too. I had to get up at 6 o'clock. Boy.
These are just some more signs of burnout. You guys already said you're burned out, so I don't know. What about outward signs of burnout? You have outbursts, short tempers of people,
I do.
Short temper.
With my family.
nervous laughter, using a lot of sick leave time, resistance to change, don't want to make decisions,
That's me.
increased use of alcohol or drugs,
Mm.
frequent talks about escaping,
Yep.
increased irritability,
Mhm.
and decline in work performance.
Mhm.
So you guys are really, really burned out.
I don't have nothing.
I done told my family I'm taking a weekend. I'm just leaving. Y'all not gonna know where I'm at.
Talks of escape.
I told you yes. I'm just
All right.
leaving.
So how do we cope with burnout? First, we do nothing, hoping it'll go away, right?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. When we try to self-medicate, doesn't work, right? It's only temporary. Take it out on other people, or we can seek professional help.
Can't afford it.
That's probably the best one, right? We don't want to take it out on other people, right?
Definitely Brandy.
So managing your personal stress. What do you think? Let's fire those employees that stress us out.
So you might as well get rid of everybody.
She's like, yeah.
You can't do that.
Let's do a whole cleanup.
You can want to though.
Or you can exercise your power to make the most of the daily decisions you face. We're in charge, right? So some of that stress we can probably eliminate. We may need to get rid of those problem employees if it's
Shit,
causing us
them
that much stress, especially if they're not being productive, right? Or you can reduce your job insecurity by making your services more marketable, right? Job insecurity may be causing you some stress. What about inserting some humor? Usually helps a little bit, right? And remember, if you're in charge, you don't necessarily need permission to do most of the things you do. If you need that break, take a walk outside and come back and, recharge yourself or regroup yourself. It's not like you have to ask for permission, because again, you're the one in charge. And if we are feeling insecure, maybe we need some additional training. Maybe we need to make sure that we're up to date on our professional development or our continuing education, right? Or maybe we need to work on our interpersonal skills. Maybe we need to think about how we're talking to people, how we're treating people. Think about how we're building those relationships in our departments. We already talked about making yourself more marketable and requesting more educational support. Some of you guys are probably doing it right now by coming back to school. Training for alternative jobs that you haven't already done before. And the last thing I want to talk about, because we're almost out of time, is you gotta take care of yourself. That's the main way of reducing that stress and burnout is, as managers, we're overseeing people, we're looking out for other people. We have our employees that we're in charge of, but we have to also remember we're in charge of ourselves too. And so we have to make sure that, we as managers are taken care of. How do you do this?
Go to the spa.
Go to a spa. You can go to a spa, take a walk on your breaks, find a quiet place to escape to during lunch. I used to do this. I would go off to the park during lunch and just sit there. Expand your network of supportive people that can be there for you. Have someone that you can go to their office and sit down and vent, right? And behave assertively, right? So that's pretty much all I have today about time management and stress. I know that finals are coming up, so hopefully you took away some of these key points on how to deal with that stress, that burnout. Summer's coming, so you'll have a little bit of a rest. You can take that time to recharge before you come back in the fall, right? For some of you.
I'm going through summer.
For some of you guys.
I've been going through the summer for 2 years now.
This is my first year now.
So that's it for today. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
See you on Tuesday.